New for 2026, Major League Rugby has a new trophy that all six teams are going to be competing for alongside the now famous MLR Shield. Hi, welcome back to the channel. It's James from the North American Rugby Database, or MLR Stats, and I'm here to talk to you today about that newest trophy, the Old Mate. Anyone that would have keeping an eye on social media recently will know that the league has been kind of teasing this new competition within Major League Rugby season, and anyone that was watching the game yesterday between the California Legion and the New England Free Jacks would have seen the Old Mate in person, this big Pewter Stein looking thing. And this is the new trophy that every single team is going to be competing for. It's going to be on the line pretty much every single week of the season. So I just wanted to make a video about kind of what this is, why I think this is really, really fun, and how it works. So let's start with what the Old Mate is and how it works. The Old Mate is a lineal challenge trophy. So it's started all the way back in Major League Rugby's very first game back in 2018 between the Houston Sabercats and the NOLA Gold. At that point, nobody was holding the Old Mate because it hadn't been contested yet. NOLA came away with a 35-26 victory in that game, so they became the inaugural holders of the Old Mate. Now, I know the trophy didn't exist, it wasn't really a thing, but for the purposes of this trophy and going forward, it is going to date all the way back, all the way through MLR's history. So, NOLA Gold, they won it the first time. They got to defend it in every single game they played. They didn't actually get a chance to hold on to it for very long because in their very next game against the Austin Elite at the time, they won, I think it was 30-17. They took it from NOLA Gold and became the new holders of the Old Mate. They would go on and contest it in their next game, and so on and so forth, all the way up to 2026, where we are right now. For those of you that are familiar with the Raven Shield or the Utrecht Shield, it is kind of a lineal trophy for international rugby. Just think of it like the Raven Shield, but for MLR. That's the best comparison we have. The Raven Shield isn't actually it's growing, and I love the idea, but it's not actually recognized by that many competitions or that many national teams or anything like that. MLR is actually recognizing the Old Mate, so that's where it's a little bit different. I hope the Raven Shield gets there, but that's the easiest comparison to make to people that might be familiar with a similar type of competition. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. MLR has changed a fair bit since 2018 with teams joining and leaving and all that stuff. By some miracle, the line of the Old Mate, despite everything that's happened in MLR with teams joining and leaving and folding and withdrawing, yada, 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 it works. The Old Mate works from 2018 to 2026 without ever ending on a team that's withdrawn, that's fallen out. It's never been kind of left on its own. It works the whole way through, which is, like I said, it's just a miracle. To throw some numbers at you, because that's kind of what I do. There's only been a very small number of teams that have actually achieved a 5-game possession of the Old Mate. The first time it happened was the San Diego Legion. They claimed it in the first week of the 2020 season, and the 2020 season was cancelled after 5 rounds because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But the Legion held it that entire season. They claimed it in the first round and then defended it 4 times, which is the first time any team has ever possessed it for an entire season. But there's a big asterisk because it was 2020 and the season got cancelled very early. The New England Free Jacks then went on a 5-game possession. They actually went on a 7-game possession in 2022 during the regular season. Then the Seattle Seawolves, at the start of 2023, they took it off Rugby New York and their season opener, and then went on a 6-game streak. That was then taken away from the Seawolves by the San Diego Legion, their historic rivals, who then went on the league's longest ever run. They held it for 11 games. So they took it from the Seawolves and then defended it 10 times in a row. That's the only time any team's ever held it for 10 games, and they actually held it for 11 games in total. Then going on, like in 2024, the Houston Sabercats had a 6-game streak, which is their first 5-game possession. Then the Chicago Hounds in 2025, early in 2025, took it and ran for another 6 games. They took it from the Free Jacks, actually, who would go on to, later in the season, take it from the Seattle Seawolves, held on to it from round 16 of the 2025 season, all the way up to the grand final, the championship final, where they claimed their 3rd championship. Because, yes, the Old Mate will continue into the postseason. It will continue into the postseason most times, and The winner of the Shield will more often than not become the holder of the Old Mate because they will have, they'll have won the season, they'll have won the final game. Chances are they will either be defending it or playing for it against the other team that makes the final. It has, however, happened once in 2021 where the Old Mate actually never made it to the playoffs. Rugby ATL took it from the Utah Warriors in the second to last game before the New England Free Jacks then defeated the Rattlers in the final game of the season, but the Free Jacks were not qualified for the playoffs. So the Old Mate just sat with the Free Jacks, despite them not being in the playoffs, sat with the Free Jacks before the 2022 season. So that's the only time, unless you're counting 2020 again, that the Old Mate has not made it to the postseason. But that seems like a rarity. We'll have to wait and see to see if it happens again in 2026. So to circle around, yep, the Free Jacks held it as the champions of the 2025 season. They came into 2026 as the holders of the Old Mate. But as anyone who watched the game yesterday against the California Legion will know, they were trounced, frankly. And the California Legion picked up both their first win in franchise history and their first possession of the Old Mate, which they will take into week 3 and defend it against the Chicago Hounds, who they face next week. Trophies, in addition to the MLR Shield, are nothing new for this competition. We're in the 9th season of Major League Rugby, but we've had a bunch of different silverware that various teams have been competing for over the years. We've got the Coffee Cup between Seattle and New England, Dunkin' versus Starbucks. We've had the I-45 Duel. We've had the Cali Cup. We've had the Texas Cup. We've had Coast to Coast Cup. We've had all kinds of things. Dog Bowl, for example. We've had loads. But because teams have withdrawn or pulled out for whatever reason, we've lost a lot of those pieces of silverware. They're just not competed for anymore because the teams doesn't exist. Without the addition of the Old Mate, I think we'd maybe have one or two for the 2026 season in addition to the Shield. So in that regard, I think the addition of the Old Mate is superb. And what's different between this trophy to a lot of the ones that I mentioned previously is that every single team is competing for this one. It's not just like a rivalry between two particular teams. Every single team will have a chance to compete for this one. What's more, it's an idea that came from Major League Rugby fans, and that seems to be the shift that MLR are going through this season, is to be more fan focused and fan centric and aware of what the fans want, are asking for, like, dislike, that kind of thing. This is an idea that came from the fans and tracks the history of Major League Rugby right back to 2018. Even if your team doesn't exist anymore, like mine for the Toronto Arrows, for example, it is a part of the history of the Old Mate, even if they never really competed for a shield. There's teams that have never even claimed the Old Mate, but they have challenged for it, so they're still part of the history of this big stein. It adds a bit for fans. You saw the interaction in the game yesterday between the cohort and the first regiment, between the fan groups for the Legion and New England, respectively. That's a bit of fun that I know that Major League Rugby wanted it to be kind of a fan thing. And then, in the post game interview, there was Jason Dam holding this thing. Like, it's good to get it out there. And it could even, interest neutral fans to be like, hey, if this team claims the Old Mate in this week, we have a chance to compete for it next week. You wouldn't have that chance if that team didn't win, for example. So there's all kinds of things that I think this is going to be great for. Adds a bit, like I'm saying, it's kind of like a regular season competition. We're all waiting for the Shield, obviously, but this is kind of a warm up, as it were. So I mentioned earlier that this was kind of a fan focused thing. This was a fan idea, and it came from a bunch of the Free Jacks fans, led by John Payne. Funnily enough, John came to me with the idea, and I'd had the idea in completely independently, but I hadn't done anything with it. Like I just noted it down because I thought it would be neat to kind of have. John took the idea, had me check the numbers, and then ran with it, and reached out to Mags and made it happen. So I'm really happy for John to get his idea off the ground. I'm really happy that the league is accepting of this idea, and I really hope that they continue to push it throughout the season. And I want to be able to do some fun stuff with it for NA Rugby DB. I can come up with all kinds of posts about it throughout the season. Occasionally, I'm going to have a few in the next few days, kind of just outlining broad history of this thing. I just want to show you something because John, like I said, it's John's idea, kind of John's baby, but he's made this site, which is basically everything you could possibly want to know about the Old Mate is at this site. So let's take a look. So here we have the Old Mate. You see, it's currently got the holder of the California Legion in the 125th match. They took it from the Free Jacks yesterday at time of recording.
It's got, it's week 2 of the 2026 season with 0 defenses. The next challenge here is against the Chicago Hounds next time. The most recent challenge was when the Legion took it off. The Free Jacks, the longest reign, like I mentioned, 11 title matches. The most defenses, so that's when they already claim the old mate, they already hold it. How many times did they then go on win streaks altogether? Most successful challenges, again, San Diego. You can go into year by year history to see what happened every season. Look, challenge history, you can search it by club. Challenge ledger, you can have a look at every single actual game in which the old mate was contested. All of these here, look at this. There's everything you could possibly want to know about the old mate is here. So I just wanted to give John a shout out and this site a little plug. I will put the link in the video description, but anything you could want is here. I do want to incorporate at least a page on the old mate to my site, and I will probably be using this resource quite a lot.
If it wasn't already obvious, I think this is a great idea. I think it adds a little bit more to normal regular season games, as I've mentioned a couple of times. It has all kinds of opportunities for fans to get involved. It has opportunities for me to kind of post interesting content about this kind of thing. I think it's great, and I hope that the league continue to embrace it as much as they have. But please let me know if there's any questions you have about the old mate that I can try and help answer that weren't included in this video. As always, you can check out my site, narugbyDB.com, or my socials at jamdelay, Jamdelay, or on Instagram at MLR Stats. There'll be lots of content for the old mate posted there over the next few days, as well as obviously content on everything to do with MLR throughout the 2026 season. Thank you very, very much for watching, and enjoy the rugby.